guess we'll just talk and just tell me a little bit first about where you're born and how you spent
Well, my family's from the Dolphinstown area, and I went to school there, of course, and in the late 50s started working at Wilton Cheese Factory, summer job.
A summer job. How old were you then?
13, 14, and
wow.
Of course there wasn't many places to work back then, and if you lived in town it was a little bit of an advantage, but in the country you helped the farmers, possibly taking in hay and whatnot. But anyways, I worked at the cheese factory in the summers, and then ended up carrying on after school, and eventually went to Kentville Agricultural College, to the dairy school there in '63, and graduated from that. And it was kind of ironic that from this area there was, I think, a class of 35 or so, and there was 4 students graduated with honors, and I was fortunate enough to be one of them. And from this area, there was, of the 4 that graduated with honors, 3 were from this area.
What kind of chores did you do as a teenager? What were the kinds of things that you did then? Because the process was different then than now. Were you like scrubbing out vats? Were you hauling things? What did you do as a teenager?
There was only 3 employees, so you were involved in everything. You were right involved in turning the cheese and cutting the curds and the whole deal.
You were, yes.
And interestingly enough, I had to, of course, look after the boiler at that time, which was coal.
Oh, a coal boiler!
Yeah.
My goodness! Yeah. Now, where would they bring the coal in from, and how much would you use? A lot. You were just open for like from April, May until September at that time.
No,
what
actually,
years are we talking about at UAL right now? The 50s,
the late 50s,
late 50s,
early 60s,
right?
And actually, it was one of the plants that stayed open all year.
Oh,
so and it was hard work.
Yeah,
and it was there was no let up, because you started making every day in April.
Yeah.
And you worked the whole summer without a day off until October, and then you started every other day.
Every other day.
Yeah, because the weather was cold enough then that the farmers could hold their milk for an extra day.
Right.
So the 1st of November every year we would start our every other day sequence.
And a lot of the farmers in the 50s and early 60s didn't have refrigeration, did they?
Water cooled.
It was just water.
Some of them air cooled. and that was a big thing. You had to grade every can of milk as it came in. Today it comes in a bulk tank, and they pump it into a tanker. And, but at that time, each can of milk could be a different quality, and was a different quality.
And it was.
And there was some that were, of course, better caretakers than others.
Yeah.
And you never had any problem with them, but the habitual ones that were careless with their cleaning and care of the milk they're always the same ones.
Now, why did you end up going to Guelph it was Kentville that you went to, rather than some other sort of job or anticipation? Did you have it was hard work?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
back then your brain doesn't kick in until you're about 40, so that didn't enter into it. You just went ahead and took what was available.
Yes. And this was available. And was it something you found out that you were good at? Proficient at.
Survived.
Yeah. Good at, proficient at.
We worked hard at it, and put a lot of extra hours in. People wouldn't do it today for sure. 70, 80 hours wasn't uncommon. If something broke, you had to repair it, and it had to be ready for the next morning. Simple as that.
So besides just having your interest sort of in the job that you're in, it was multitasking for sure. Very early on, did you have to do welding or those kinds of things, and electrical? Tell me Plumbing?
Plumbing, electrical, you basically, if an agitator carriage broke, it had to be ready to go the next morning at 7 o'clock without fail.
Yeah.
Because that milk come in.
Yeah, because you were on the spot in order to do that.
Yeah. So you became proficient at a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Necessity.
Out of necessity.
Yes.
Yeah. Now tell me a little bit about once you graduated, did you go back to UEL or you then were a cheesemaker?
Yeah.
You weren't sort of an apprentice.
That's right.
And so what did the gang of three, two of them, they owned a cheese factory at that time.
It was a farmer's co-op.
So
there was the cheesemaker,
right.
and he hired his staff.
Right. Now, were they necessarily also cheesemakers having gone to dairy school? Was it required by then to have the assistant cheesemakers to...
Well, no, there had to be a licensed cheesemaker in every plant, and then depending on the size of it, they might have other ones under them. Some plants had far more employees than others, obviously.
Now, were you licensed when you came out of your course?
Mm-hmm.
You were then licensed.
Yeah, and then if you were lucky enough to take over a plant of your own, your abilities were monitored by government standards.
Yes.
And if you fell below certain things, your license could be revoked.
Right. So where did you go? Cheesemakers were hired by farm co-ops or by privately
Private
owned
owners.
And so how did you direct your path? Did you just sort of apply? Did somebody approach you? What in the 60s was... You graduated in the 60s?
Yeah.
And
Actually,
things were changing.
They were starting to change
Yeah.
then. Yeah. Actually, I was approached by Alt Foods in Winchester, which had a huge plant, condensery and cheese, everything, powder, butter, and because of the results of my Kentville schooling, several of us at the top of the class, and that was probably the reason. Anyways, I ended up going to work there for Sam Alt, who owned the Empire down there, which is now Parmalat.
Yes. Yeah.
And Sam, besides having this huge processing business, he had several small cheese factories in that area, which they were his personally.
Yes.
They weren't involved in the big company, and that was kind of like his hobby, I think. Anyways, he hired me to look after the one plant in Dixon's Corners, Ontario. That's just north of Iroquois. And at that time, there was numerous factories in that area, and I was only there for 4 years. And during that 4 years, there was, even at that time, half a dozen of those were closed the time I went there to the time I left.
And the reason behind that was
Transportation.
transportation.